it definitely has morphed and changed over the years, especially like the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Things are changing so much. But I feel that in its core, when you're talking about the meaning of record labels, they are truly the custodians of recorded music.
Yeah. That's a very good way of putting it. They're the custodians, yeah.
You're listening to Creatives Prevail, unraveling the stories of creative professionals.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Creatives Prevail. I'm your host, Mike Zimmerlich, and my next guest is Robin Esterhammer from Perseverance Records. In this interview, we discuss how Robin built a niche audience around film scores and collectors by releasing soundtracks and compilations exclusively on CD. We also get into what place record labels have in the current music industry. Let's get into it. Hey, Robin, how are you?
Hey, Michael, I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to the interview, and thank you so much for having me on here.
Oh, my pleasure. No, thank you so much for doing so. I always love to have a fellow label on to the show because there's always things that we can go off on and rant about and things like that too. But also I feel kindred spirits in that particular way because there's something to be said about running a record label that I always felt was a huge honor. And when you are representing a creator's work, right? And so it's something that I've always taken very seriously and was very... it was an absolute pleasure to do something along those lines. So I always like to talk to people who also ran record labels.
Perfect.
But your story is so interesting though. And I do want to go back for a second because I mean, I love soundtracks too. And I remember as a kid, I used to listen to Star Wars and New Hope specifically.
Yeah.
Lots of Disney. I mean, as a kid, I was a huge, still am a huge Disney fan. But did you love film scores and when you were a kid?
I wasn't really into music until I was about 13 because I didn't like the music that my parents played, and I was always looking for something, and I never understood what people get out of music because it was just completely alienated to me. I liked a little bit of classical music, and when I was little, Queen was really big. So I'm like a huge Queen fan, and that was always fun. But then I went to Canada, actually. I was living in Germany at the time. I went to Canada when I was 13, and friends of ours took us to see The Empire Strikes Back. And I was like, whoa! That was just like a mind-blowing experience. And then I went out and bought the soundtrack, and it was the single, the double LP wasn't sold to us in Germany. We only had the single one that started with Imperial March and then had the main title on the second side. And I just played that record to death. And then the next one was Once Upon a Time in the West by Ennio Morricone. And I just loved that one. And then the decisive moment was Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
Wow.
I mean, when I saw that, I was just like, wow, who is this guy? James Horner? What has he done before? I've never heard of that name. And I thought he had already been an established film composer, but he had done like low budget B movies for Roger Corman, and I was like, this guy's gonna go places, And then, of course, all the thing leading up to the Kickstarter campaign, which was just wonderful. I mean, now like 3,000 CDs later, or 4,000 CDs later, I stopped counting, and like 800 LPs. I'm actually producing my own label. And I get to talk to a lot of people that I was never really expecting to talk to, like James Cameron, for example, or Bruce Campbell or Jerry Goldsmith,
I'm very curious though, is that, I mean, that's obviously incredible that you have been able to get those opportunities. But were your family, was anybody that you knew in the music industry? I'm just very kind of curious on how that came about, because I loved your story about essentially you found in a dumpster these master tapes for this film called Dr. Phibes, Dr. Phibes Rises Again?
Yeah.
Yes. And you just decided at that point that you wanted to release that? I mean, how did that come about?
Well, actually, it wasn't me who found the tapes. It was my friend Paul Tonks who writes the liner notes for us. Um, he found them or a friend of his actually found them in the dumpster behind CTS Studios in London. And then he gave them to Paul, and Paul contacted me because I had been working for Christopher Franke at Sonic Images at that time, and he was looking for a gig to write liner notes for labels, for soundtrack labels. And he said, "You know what? We had spoken before, and he's really a cool guy, very nice guy, and really good writer. And we just hit it off. And then he said, you know what? A friend of mine just gave me the tapes, the master tapes from Dr. Phibes Rises Again, and I know that's one of your favorite movies. What should we do with them?" So I got in touch with the composer, John Gale, and he said, "We can certainly release a soundtrack, but only if the copyright holder of the masters is interested." And that was MGM at the time. I think it still is. And they said, I talked to Jonathan Watkins, who was at the head of A&R at the time at MGM UA. I paid them $1,000 advance, which was a lot of money 25 years ago, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so they licensed the score to me, and the label was born. And I was like, the next one was Invasion of the Body Snatchers with Denny Zeitlin, and I actually flew up to San Francisco to interview him in a hotel room that we included the audio interview on the CD. And then the next one was the first Dr. Phibes movie, The Abominable Dr. Phibes, which I was approached to by Basil Kirchen's friend Chris Tanner from England. And I talked to Basil, and he said, "Yeah, you know, we can do a soundtrack. I would love to. You know, it's just the score holds such a place in my heart because it was like one of the most personal scores I've ever written." And I was like, "Yeah, definitely, let's do it." So back to Jonathan Watkins at MGM, another $1,000 later, and we sold. Of those two, we sold about 3,000 each, which is amazing for a film score.
That is incredible, so, especially because I mean, I've never heard those films before until I started researching into you. So is that because maybe generational, or is it that those films had this very niche community that have a lot of quite a bit of fan base behind it?
I don't know. I think it could have something to do with different generations, but those films, even in the Vincent Price catalog, there is such a demand for those two scores that they were like always looking out for them, and I think that was one of the reasons why we actually sold 3,000 of each.
Wow. Now, you just backtrack for a second. Before you started the label, you were already in the music industry. You were already working in the music industry.
I was actually working in the film industry. I got a degree in cinema in 1996 from Columbia College in Los Angeles, and then I worked as a producer, and I produced a lot of music videos and commercials and little things, and including one in Cambodia and one in Vietnam, which was really cool, great experience. And I switched over to film music when a friend of my college roommate actually said that there is a record label that's looking for a German-speaking assistant to the CFO. And I sent them my resume, spoke half of it in German, half of it in English. And they said, "Yeah, definitely come on in." And it was actually Christopher Franke, who at the time was scoring Babylon 5 and had a huge success with that. I mean, he used to be with Tangerine Dream in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, did tons of soundtracks with them, and is a really cool guy. Wonderful man, absolutely lovely, wonderful man. And he offered me the job as his assistant, because originally the position was supposed to be assistant to the CFO. But then when Christopher saw how much I knew about film music, he said, you'll be my assistant now. And he had a record label at the time called Sonic Images Records, and we did all the Babylon 5 soundtracks, whatever we could get our hands on, we did. And he said at some point, when I want to move over to the label side of the company, not the production side, the film music production side, he said, you're too valuable to me as my assistant, because except music he wrote himself, except for writing music, I did everything. From spotting notes to liner notes, hiring to, you name it, I did it. And he said that he would not want to let me go over to the label. And I said, I think time for me has come to leave. And then in 1999, I went over to my own label, to Perseverance Records, and haven't looked back since. And that was it. That's how this came about.
That's a big jump, by the way, and I give you a lot of credit for being in the industry already, essentially, and understanding the inner workings. And you, of course, understand the risks that are involved when starting your own venture, let alone a record label, which has so much risk involved.
Which is like
for film music, which is so very specific, and to leave something that's stable like that to go into something that you knew had some interest, but also it was still very early on, right? You were able to successfully sell, those two first records, but still to have the longevity that you have since that time, that's a totally different story. So I give you a lot of credit for that, because that's not easy to do, to leave, first of all, and then second of all, to persevere, if you will. It is definitely quite a bit of accomplishment. So congratulations on that fact.
Thank you. Yeah, it was, at the time I wasn't really thinking of having it like as a long run. I was always like working from one release to the next, and thought, I'll do another one. And then all of a sudden, like 50 releases later, I was like, this is a full-time job, And I had worked with so many cool people, like Gergely Hubay, the late Gergely Hubay, who was like a phenomenal writer. He did like 20 albums first, or even more. And Paul Tongs, Randall Larson, Jeff Bond, all the guys that I worked with. And we have an amazing graphic artist named James Wingrove in Australia. And he's also a big movie buff. And I always was looking for somebody who would understand the picture, and the music, and he would know exactly what I was talking. I said, let's call the first album Tears in Rain. Oh, Blade Runner, and then the next one is called Bumps and Hollows. Yeah, that's from Legend, and the other previous graphic designers never knew really enough about movies, and they never really got it, And then I was approached by James, actually, who had been a customer of ours, and then we just got friendly, and I said, well, would you like to do the next album? And I forgot what it was now, but we did the album together, and it was just phenomenal. It just looked so good. And then, again, like 50 releases later, we're like on 113th release now, or something like that.
Wow.
And which is actually not. If you compare to like La La Land or Varese, it's like nothing. La La Land has like a 700th release now, or something like that, and Varese is just beyond everything.
But still, I ran an independent record label for 16 years, and I've never gotten to that level. I think we've done over the years maybe 40, 50 different releases over 16-year time frame. So to do that is also quite an achievement, I will definitely say.
Yeah, I'm pretty proud of it. Yeah.
I'm curious that why did you decide to leave instead of doing the label on the side? Why did you decide that I was going to quit my job and then do this full time?
I guess because I was really passionate about film music at the time, and I had pretty much reached my pinnacle with Christopher at the production company, Sonic Images Productions. Um, and I just wanted to do something new with film music. And I mean, I got to work a little bit on the label because I was like the indoor specialist for Babylon 5. And I always liked to get my hands like really in depth into the production side of film score soundtracks. And when that didn't work out with Christopher, I decided, if I want to do it, I tried, I tried Varese, I tried Entrada, I tried you name it, and none of them were hiring at the time. And then I decided, what, I'll just do my own label, and that's the way it started.
So definitely sounds like once you've had that success, that started rolling in more opportunities and so forth along the way.
Yeah.
Plus, you've already had some established connections
Yes,
in the industry
definitely.
that helped you get which also definitely helps, right? Where if you were going into it with no connections, no network whatsoever, it would be kind of challenging for them to also take the risk in you.
Yeah, it would be very challenging. But the good thing is I had composer friends, I had producer friends, director friends, and they all helped me. And like Danny Zeitlin, I mean, he pretty much set up the entire interview gear. I didn't have to do anything, and he just was so happy that somebody was interested in his music. I mean, the only film score he ever wrote, and he was so grateful, and I was grateful, that like somebody like, who worked with Philip Kaufman, the director of Body Snatchers, that he would actually work with a complete nobody, who just isn't famous at all, or Craig Saffin is the same thing. Wonderful, lovely man, and we've become close friends over the years, and we've been to his house several times, and he's actually my son's favorite film composer.
So that definitely helps.
Yeah, that definitely helps. So, yeah, I had a little bit of a track record and a little bit of a reputation in the film music industry, and uh, uh, when the time came to make a decision about how my next 10, 15 years would shape up, like it was rather easy actually to for me to stand up and say, I'm going to do my own label.
So going to film scores for a second, we were joking before about how very niche that is. Mm-hmm. So how do you promote those releases, right? Because you were for the most, I mean, I know that you've been doing some recent films as well, but a lot of it is back catalog films that you are essentially either releasing or re-releasing those film scores. So that is, I feel, is a very specific market of
it's a
of
very specific
interest.
market, yes. And I'm working with somebody right now who actually set up this in Brian Scott Gross. In Los Angeles, and he's a really cool guy. He really knows. He reaches out to people like yourself and arranges for interviews and stuff like that. We had a social media director, Carla Zinniger, who actually passed away a few years ago. And ever since then, we don't really have like a social media director. So if you know anybody, or if anybody who's listening, get in touch with me. And let me know if you might be interested in working with us as a social media director. There's not a lot of money in it, but it's really not a lot of work because we don't do that many releases a year. But I've been doing it like myself for the past 4 years, and I'm just not good at it. And you need to be like on Instagram. You constantly have to be in the face of the fans, so they don't forget about you and go to La La Land or Varese or Entrada at Silver Screen,
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the way we had been promoting them, and also through our music video distributors, MVD in Pennsylvania. They're really good about promoting stuff, and we have had a really good relationship relationship with him for like the past 15, I think it was 15 years, something like that now.
Wow. Yeah, I can. Did you acquire like email addresses in the past or things like that? How like even pre social media? How would you normally go through that promotion process?
In the beginning, I did. I had like, I'd say maybe 1,200 emails from people that have had expressed interest in receiving news from us, or people from orders when they ordered music from us. I kept their email address, and I collected all of them, and then I would send 50 emails at a time, because at that time, that was the maximum allowance of email that you could send in one email mailing. So I did like, how much is it, like 24 emails every time we had a new release. And I did a lot of that in the beginning. And then when the label grew and grew, I was just like in no position to do that anymore. And I hired somebody who would do that for us.
Gotcha. So I did want to talk about, you did do a Kickstarter campaign last year, specifically for James Horner and you worked at that with their estate to release some of his recordings. Can you talk a little bit more about how that came about?
Let me think. How do we come about that? It was through a friend of mine, Nikiforos Chrysoloras, who's in Greece, and he's our go-to producer and also for re-recordings that we're slowly branching out into a little bit now. He had gotten in touch with Sarah Horner, James's widow, and said, I would like to re-record, what was it?
The Kickstarter campaign?
The Kickstarter.
There was a number of recordings. It was, I think, some of his original music. I believe.
Yeah, the original music. Yes, exactly. We went to release some of his classical music, and then I said, well, why don't we release The Hand? And then Nicky Force was like, he scored that? It's an Oliver Stone picture, And we reached out to Sarah. It was really nice and supportive and all that. And we went with the whole Kickstarter campaign, and Paul Tonks was involved in it. James Wingoff did a lot of the artwork for it. And we needed a certain amount of money, and it just didn't pan out. People weren't interested. They just said, they didn't say anything, they were like, we're indifferent. So that
which is so kind of surprising to me, because James Horner,
Horner, exactly.
It's Horner, one of the most legendary film composers. For those who don't know, you mentioned Star Trek II: Wrath of Khan, but also Apollo 13, Avatar. I mean, the list goes on and on as far as Rocketeer. Yeah, I mean,
great
you can see amazing score. I mean, so much stuff. And I know some of my family members are listening like, Mike, why aren't you putting out all these other films that he's done? Because my family is even more into film composition than I am. But it's, I mean, the list is extensive on the legendary soundtracks that he has done. And so it's interesting that there was not enough interest in that coming out, but also too, I mean, it is his original music too, and sometimes that's sometimes hard to separate out the film from the film composer, right? You think about even somebody, John Williams, for example. I think he just did last year he did his first concerto or something along those lines, where it was his own original music.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that he released, and which is amazing. But people, when they think of John Williams, they're thinking Indiana Jones, they're thinking Star Wars, they're thinking Harry Potter, right? They're not necessarily thinking of him and his original works. That's outside of films.
Yes, that's outside of films. And at some point, we were actually looking into having like a little side label called Perseverance Prestige. And the inaugural release of that one was Craig Saffin's circus music for the Barnum and Bailey circus show. And then I contacted a whole other bunch of film composers. And then Bruce Broughton actually told me, and he said, You know what? I don't know if that's a good idea because the classical fan group is completely different from the film music group, from the film
Mm.
music fans. And I was like, yeah, you're right. You actually do have a point there. Because I was wondering if I could release some of his original classical music. And he said, I don't think there's really too much of a market for that. And then we kind of dropped the idea because I got the same vibe from a few other composers. And then that was that. And going back to the Kickstarter campaign, we're kind of working on a smaller version of it now, again with Nikki Photos, and we are planning to do the Pied Piper by James Horner, which is a short fairy tale directed by Nicholas Meyer of Star Trek II fame. And that's something that we're going to re-record, and it's not going to cost that much money, and maybe that way we can build up a reputation of a label that people can trust to deliver goods, good music, and we that's one of the first ones that we want to do. And then we have been in touch with Brigham Young University in Salt Lake City, and they have a lot of Jerry Fielding scores that we are thinking of re-recording and hopefully release on our label, but that's years in the future.
You also mentioned too about how much you sold over CDs and vinyl, and do you feel that because the last 15 years especially, there's been this massive resurgence of vinyl, which I always thought was going to be maybe a 3 to 5 year trend, but
Yeah, I know.
it's still going up, right? Which is
Yeah.
insane, and it's amazing that that's happening, and I really do appreciate that fact because there's something to be said about the tangibility of vinyl. So have you seen that also impact your end? Have you seen where overall sales since the last 15 years have gone up?
Well,
Overall?
we never did vinyl. We actually never
Never really did vinyl. Wow.
never did
Okay.
vinyl. It's because it's something it's very expensive. When you have like a limited release, I think it costs like up to $8 per CD per LP to be pressed.
Yeah,
And
it's about that. Yeah.
yeah, that's just nothing that I feel comfortable spending when it's already hard to sell CDs, which are much cheaper, about half the price of LPs. So I was like, I have a friend who used to work with us, Brian Davis. He now has his own Note for Note music record company. Also, somebody you might want to interview. Really interesting guy. And I think it's safer to go with a CD release than with an LP release, unless you're like really already established as a label. But it's not something I'm planning to do in the very near future.
Interesting. And I know that there's still quite a large community that still love CDs, right? And it has become essentially a collector's item. I know, for example, my car doesn't have a CD player in it anymore.
Mine doesn't either.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where CDs is an interesting point, just like vinyl is, where more people are now purchasing vinyl players, right? But for CDs, it's becoming exceedingly more difficult. It's not as convenient as it once was, where everything had a CD player in it. Your car had a CD player. You had some sort of CD player in your home. Your computer had a CD player built into it. Those things are, for the most part, are non-existent unless you're specifically getting something. There you go. Exactly. You have to get like a separate device to plug in to be able to play CDs.
It's
now.
a tiny little LG portable CD player that I plug into my computer, and that's the one I'm listening to right now.
Oh, very nice. Oh, that's very cool. It's so interesting, right? Is that because CD does have that quality to it, but also is that tangibility, just like vinyl does, and people still love to collect CDs.
They still like to collect CDs. They like to read the booklet. They like to read the liner notes and look at the credits. I mean, that's always something I'm really looking forward to whenever I buy a new CD. I'm one of the few people who still actually actively buy CDs. and it's just so much fun. It's it's like I wish I could show you my collection, but I can't turn the computer on without connecting. Um, and I hope that at some point CDs will have a comeback, because I don't think that streaming and downloading. I mean, I've never downloaded a score in its entirety. I've listened to.
I could take a picture and show him on my iPad.
That's okay.
Are you sure?
My son.
Yeah, I heard it. No, it's okay.
Um,
I'll believe you.
Where were we?
Talk about CDs and seeing
CDs, yeah,
about
they will have a comeback like LPs had, because it's so cool when you sit there and you look at your collection, and on streaming and downloading, you just don't get that experience. It's like a digital file in your computer, and it just doesn't, it doesn't. The experience of listening to music is not the same with downloads.
What I discovered, and I remember this when I was younger, listening to film scores, but also just music in general on CDs. And I rediscovered this when I started investing into vinyl, because I was never into vinyl as a kid. It was much later. It was actually after I launched to the record label and I saw the resurgence of vinyl, I decided I was going to start a vinyl collection so I could understand that feeling better, right? So that and I understand why people were getting into this. And one of the interesting things that I discovered, there's something to be said about convenience of streaming. I mean, I stream all the time, right? That's most of my music consumption is streaming, just because it's convenient, right? And I admit it, I'm very much a cherry picker. I'm usually not the person that listens to something from start to finish. I cherry pick. But there's something to be said about the friction that a medium that CD now has, where before CD was more convenient than vinyl, right? Because it's a much more compact, really compact of a system, right? And it was a lot more accessible to be played in the car, to be played elsewhere in comparison to vinyl, and you still had high quality experience.
Yes,
especially
exactly.
outside of cassettes, right? Where nowadays it's right. It was much better quality in cassettes, but that's actually essentially what it ended up replacing. But nowadays, that's no longer a convenience. It's quite opposite, in fact.
Yeah.
But now it's about the friction that CDs now creates, where you have to now, like for a case for yourself, you have to go to your wall in the back, go through your collection, find something that you are inspired to listen to at that particular time, take it out of its case, take the CD out,
put it on the tray,
put it in, and you are now, you can technically skip on like vinyl, where you you can technically skip on vinyl too. There's some that can do that, but for the most part, you can't. You're listening to that particular CD from start to finish.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
For the most part, I would sometimes skip depending upon my mood, but it's a lot more challenging to skip on a CD in a comparison to just jumping on streaming. So you had to go through that entire process to start with to listen to this. And there's something to be said that I put all this time and effort. I'm going to now actively listen to the music because I put the effort into it. Unlike streaming, where I'm just going to open up an app and start playing.
And then it just plays. It plays for like the next 3 hours without...
Right. So most of the time it's going to be in the background while you're focusing on other things, which is great for many things. But if you wanted to actually truly pay attention to the music itself, there's something to be said about putting in that CD and putting in that effort that you made such a commitment essentially to doing so. It is a commitment because instead of taking a couple of seconds, you're talking about even though it's only 30 seconds to a minute in comparison to a handful of seconds, it's just that time and effort that you put into that's going to want you to listen to that music even more and actually pay attention to it rather than being something in the background.
Yep, absolutely. You're right. Yeah.
I did want to talk about where labels are at today because essentially, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I mean, that was a huge boon when it came to the music industry, especially for CDs, right? That, mid to late 90s, early 2000s, CDs was by far the most popular medium and so forth. And especially at the time, labels were very much the gatekeepers to distribution for music.
Yeah.
Now in today, that's a very different situation. Obviously, streaming is now by far the most popular way to consume music, but also there has been the question of where labels exist in the music industry, and should they exist in general? Because there are now so many options that are out there for composers and for artists and for copyright owners as a whole for distribution of music. Are labels still necessary? So I want to know what your thoughts on that is, where you feel labels exist today.
I think there still is a place for labels, just because they have the ability to cherry pick, if you were, the most, I don't want to say the most best music, but they can kind of filter out the hoi polloi from what they get submitted to what's actually going to be released. I mean, everybody and their sister can now do an LP. I mean, an album of their music and put it up on Spotify. You know, you don't need a distributor anymore. But it's also that for like regular, I call normal music, like rock, pop, folk, funk, jazz. They can do that. They just have more of a what's the word I'm looking for? I'm looking for a specific word. Normal music has like much more of a fan base that is localized. It's like an artist from India, for example, can make his own album and put it up on Spotify. And a film score doesn't necessarily have that localized fan base. It's more like a widespread global, if you can call it event, but it's not like the normal music that people would listen to. And I think that the distribution that film music in particular now enjoys is that it's targeted to a much more focused fan base than, let's say, normal music.
What I like to say when somebody brings that up with me is labels have always been this, which is they've always been the custodians of recorded music.
Yep.
And that still is true today. There are a lot of other options out there, absolutely. But there is so much that's involved behind the scenes to release recorded music commercially. And even though there's a ton of options that are out there, a label's job is to make sure that every step is taken to do that, to release that recorded music as correctly, I would say correctly, or as successfully as possible.
Yeah.
And because you know as well as I do, I mean, I can only imagine on your end, the administrative work that's involved, the paperwork to make sure that everything is correct. There's so much that's going on behind the scenes to make sure that that is a smooth process in distributing that music that a distributor alone is not going to handle, and neither should they. Where a record label, that is their job, is to take care of all those things across the board. And that I think is still very much relevant today. I also do agree with you that we talk about niche quite a bit, and I think that's very much the case too. I think labels that have, like you said, a very focused fan base, they are now essentially becoming a tastemaker in their own right, and that you are paying attention to that particular label
Right.
because they know their audience and
They know the
going to
audience.
curate.
They cater directly to their audience. Whereas
Correct.
the people who do let's call it normal music again, they just cater to their fan base, and which is, unless they're like a global phenomenon like Taylor Swift or Miley Cyrus or whatever, or Beyonce, they can just get more. It's more of a targeted audience.
Exactly, and I think that's wonderful, right? Is that there's still a reason behind it, and again that care, that curation of the catalog, right, that goes behind it is still very much relevant today. It definitely has morphed and changed over the years, especially like the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Things are changing so much, but I feel that in its core, when you talk about the meaning of record labels, they are truly the custodians of recorded music.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very good way of putting it. They're the custodians. Yeah.
So speaking of which, I did want to talk about some compilations that you're working on too. So of course you're doing film scores as well, but you also are doing different compilations. Can you talk about how those come about, how you make those decisions on developing those compilations?
Well, we started a new anthology series called Forsaken Themes from Fantastic Films. We're working on volume 3 and 4 right now. And the way they came about was that there are several scores that I always wanted to release, but they were too short, or there were only like that specific amount of music that we could put on an album. And so I decided, why don't I make a compilation of science fiction, horror, and fantasy film music with just cuts, like cherry pick again, the word they use, that you can put on the album, and we actually licensed re-recorded music. Like on volume 1, we had a suite from Highlander, which was performed by the Danish Film Orchestra. Amazing piece. And then we put something else on, and I contacted a few composer friends of mine, and they were all like, yeah, definitely, let's do that, So we have like re-recordings of on volume 2 was Highlander, was like an 11-minute suite that Nikki Forrest produced for us and recorded for us in Croatia, Macedonia, sorry. And then we did Resident Evil. We did the unused score for Hellraiser by Coil, which was a really cool experience to have that produced. We have a suite from Alien on number 3. We're gonna have the actual temp track music from Legend, the Jerry Goldsmith score, that was used for editing, that Terry Rawlings edited to the picture. And that's like the kitchen scene and like the unicorn scene, and it's like and then Joe Renzetti is actually re-recording and reproducing and re-recording a suite from Poltergeist 3 for the album. Was the third or the fourth? I think the third. Yeah, the third album, volume 3, and from Basket Case 2, and it's just like little bits and pieces that are special that you wouldn't be able to find anywhere else, and so it's always a challenge to find enough music for those compilations. And then whenever you have like 50, 55, 60 minutes of music, okay, we have another label, we have another compilation ready, and that's actually probably the way we want to go in the future, with just those few anthologies, and then the occasional complete soundtrack. But I think that's probably the way we're going to go in the future.
Well, definitely let me know when the Alien Suite comes out, because that is something that would be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I'll let you know, Michael.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, yeah, and it makes sense, right? Because I think having these specific compilations, again, it goes back to what we were talking about before about being a custodian, being a curator, and this is definitely a part of it. Is you're essentially curating the score themselves, essentially, and putting it together for a very particular type of audience. So, very, very smart.
Thank you.
So we can start wrapping things up here. I did have a couple of fun questions for you.
Okay.
So first question I have for you is, what was the last film that you saw in theaters?
Top Gun Maverick, and I was deaf on my right ear afterward. Literally, I was literally deaf on my
Wow. Did you go to like an IMAX theater or something like that, or?
No, it's just a regular
Wow.
theater here in Castle Rock in Colorado. It's a regular theater, but it was so loud.
It was very loud. That was a good movie, though. That was a great film.
I like the first one better, but the score was great. You know,
The score was great.
score was
I actually saw a re-release of Edge of Tomorrow in theaters. They had a re-release in theaters for Edge of Tomorrow a couple months ago, so I saw that in theaters again. That was fun. So that was a great movie. I like that movie. What was one of your favorite soundtracks that you do not have on your catalog?
I always wanted to do Highlander because I'm a huge Queen fan, and I always wanted to do Highlander, and that's still my goal, my holy grail. But the music supervisor who was in charge of all the music and all that just strung me along for literally 27 years until I finally realized it's not going to happen, you know. And we had actually spoken to Brian May a couple of times, and he was all for it, but then, you know, the music supervisor just dropped it again and just didn't work. I also wanted to do a complete version of Legend, which is my favorite score, the Jerry Goldsmith score. I wanted to do that one, but the rights are actually already owned by Film Tracks in London, another film music label. And they shortly thereafter released a complete score, which I was glad to have, but I would have loved to have that one in my label collection.
How often does that occur where it doesn't pan out because I can only imagine the rights that's involved and the people that you need to talk to make a project like this happen? How often does it where
it does? The last one that actually happened was Flatliners. I had been courting that with Sony for several years now, and then they just told me, "Oh, we decided to go with another label." And I was really upset because I had really worked a lot on that, and you know, and that's with Entrada, but you know, they have more money than I do.
Sometimes that's what happens. Okay, last question for you. If you were only able to give one piece of advice to somebody else, what would that one piece of advice be?
To start a film music label? Or just in general?
Just, I would say in general, because filming a film label is very specific. So let's say in general.
One piece of advice, I'd say be honest and reliable. That's the best thing. Be nice, be kind, be friendly, be honest, and you will be successful in life.
I couldn't agree more. It's something that sounds so basic, but it really isn't, you know? And I always live that way of being honest and reliable. And it's both of those things, right? Because reliable is also the fact that you are going to make mistakes, right? Yeah. You might be late to something or might do those things, but if you are honest and are owning up to those things, that in itself makes you reliable, right? Yeah. Because people are going to trust you that you're going to, even when you do make your mistakes, that you're going to make it right. Yeah. In whatever way is necessary. Yeah. And I think that's important to have both of those of being both honest and reliable.
I agree.
So I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you, Robin, so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for interviewing me. This was a lot of fun.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. And yeah, so definitely we'll make sure that we have everything in the show notes for people to check you out. Can't wait for these compilations to come out as well. And I wish you the best of luck moving forward.
And thank you. And let me reiterate, I was really serious about people contacting me for becoming a social media director for us, freelance.
And, definitely put the word out on that too.
That'd be great. Thank you so much, Mike. I really enjoyed being on the show.